Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anastasia, and I am the events manager for Bank Square Books and Savoy Bookshop and Cafe. We're so delighted that you were able to tune in to tonight's virtual event. This is our first read of the day, our partnership series with the Day newspaper of 2021, and we're so excited to welcome back Luanne Rice. I have just a few quick pieces of business before we begin. So there are some quick setting modifications here on Zoom that we encourage you to make, which will make the event experience just a little bit more interactive. We encourage you to hit escape to close the full screen, so you can still have it big on your screen, but not full screen. Activate the chat feature as well as the Q&A feature, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen here. If you'd like to participate in the chat, you can set your chat settings to all panelists and attendees, so everyone will be able to see what you're chatting and you'll be able to interact with one another. And we encourage you to chat in, say hello. I see some of you already have done so, and let us know where you're viewing from. We just ask that you adhere to our virtual code of conduct, which will be posted in the chat shortly. And Kaylee and Sherry, who are our event tech tonight, will be chatting with you and monitoring the chat, as well as sharing links to Luanne's books. And Sherry and Kaylee are just going to wave a little hello, so you get to sort of know who's behind their little names there. Thank you, ladies. So you can also ask questions in the Q&A module, which is also at the bottom of the screen. And there's also a feature where you'll be able to upvote the questions that are the most interesting. We have a lot of people here tonight, which is incredible. Again, thank you so much for coming out to support one of our favorite authors and our bookstore and our local newspaper. But because there's so many people here, and I'm sure so many people who are going to be excited to ask questions, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So make sure you upvote the ones that are most interesting. And Luanne has asked me to thank all of you who have submitted questions in advance. And she, much like us, all wish there was unlimited time to answer every question. If you're joining us tonight from Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in as well. We'll do our best to filter your comments in, but to really join the conversation, come and join us here on Zoom, and you can click the link above the Facebook, and that'll bring you here to Zoom. The event will be recorded tonight, so if you have to leave, the recording will be available at a later date. Finally, if you'd like to pre-order a copy of tonight's event book, The Shadow Box, we will be posting links in the chat throughout the event, which will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Tonight's event is a special preview of The Shadow Box, which officially goes on sale February 1st. Books pre-ordered through us will be made available or mailed out on February 1st. And Luanne has graciously signed copies for us. So we have all of the books for tonight's event will be signed. And if you'd like a personalized signed copy, please make a note in your order comments and we'll do our best to accommodate that. And now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to tonight's panelists. Last year, we kicked off the Read of the Day series, which is an event partnership between Bank Square and the Day, in style with a packed house event at Bank Square Books featuring Luanne in conversation with Rick Koster for her debut thriller, Last Day. It was just around this time in January. The bookstore was elbow to elbow, and who would have thought that not 2 months later, we would be walking into a global pandemic where social distancing was mandatory. And here we are now doing virtual events. Things are certainly different now, but we couldn't be more excited to have Luanne joining us again to kick off Read of the Day for 2021. Now to talk about her next thriller, The Shadow Box. Just brief introductions for our panelists this evening. Luanne is the best-selling author of 35 novels, and those novels have been translated into 25 languages, and several of them have been adapted for television. Her books often center on love, family, nature, and the sea. She's a dear friend of our bookstore, and we're so very grateful to have her. In The Shadow Box, she delivers a haunting thriller about how far one wife is willing to go to expose the truth and the length someone will go to stop her. Interviewing Luanne tonight is Rick Koster, arts and music reporter for The Day. Rick has been working at The Day for over 20 years, and he is the champion of the Read of the Day program. He's also a really great friend of our bookstores too. So with that being said, thank you for listening to me, but I know you really want to hear from Luanne and Rick, so I'm going to ask them to come back on screen, and we're going to let them talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take audience questions. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Ani. It was a wonderful, wonderful introduction. And hi, Rick.
Hey, Luanne. It's always wonderful to see all of you people. Anastasia, Luanne, Kaylee, Sherry, thank you guys. Are you excited, Luanne?
I am really excited for many reasons, but not least of all because I can see, I don't have my glasses on, so I can't really see the comments that well, but I can see a few names that have popped up and some really dear friends are here. from across country and also here in Connecticut, and somebody from France and somebody from London, somebody from so thank you all for coming. I'm so thrilled. And that's one of the great things about Zoom, right? That people who couldn't come to Mystic can join us here online, which is wonderful.
Another great thing is that, as Anastasia mentioned in her intro, your books have been translated into 25 languages, and we'd like everyone to know that Luanne and I will be speaking in all 25 of those languages tonight, just so everybody can appreciate it.
Actually make it 27, because also add cat and dog. Because we're
Cat and dog. Exactly. You know, before we start, Luanne, I would like to thank very much Bank Square Books, because it is hard to believe that we're starting a new year of the Read of the Day book club. And I do not want to make light of the situation. It's been a rough year for everybody, but if there's any silver lining, it's that a year ago when we started, we could not have shoehorned another person into Bank Square Books. And if we were going to do this live tonight, Bank Square was going to have to get a new building, or we would have had to move, I don't know, Providence Center or something. So this will work out.
I second that, thanks to Bank Square Books, and also to you, Rick, and to the day, because it's so great that we have this community here in southeastern Connecticut that really loves books, loves readers, loves writers, loves newspapers. And on that note, I would like to encourage everyone to subscribe to The Day. It's my newspaper. It's my favorite paper. All local papers need our help and our support. And just look, I mean, here's Rick, who supports bookstores, writers, all the arts in southeastern Connecticut, and we really need him and we need them. So we're very lucky to be here all together, and to be here, during the pandemic, and to get together by the fireside. Rick has a fire, I have a fire, right? It's cozy. We're cozy.
It's snowing.
It's snowing in Connecticut. It's like a little fairy tale. There's probably cats that are going to traipse by, and you have Virgil there. I'm going to just show everyone my fire because it's amazing.
That is a good fire.
Isn't that great? My andirons are owls and their eyes glow.
Now it's starting to sound like Halloween.
Oh, okay, forget it. Anyway.
No, I like Halloween. Okay, listen, Luanne. I don't think I've ever done an event that was pre-publication before, and because I tend to blather, I do not want to do any spoilers in terms of the plot. So I'm going to be very careful with what I ask you so that we don't give anything away. Now, I have been fortunate enough to read the book, so I do know what happens. Maybe that's unfortunate, because now I could blurb the end of it and you would be not happy with me. But I'm going to throw you a curveball when we start here, because when we did an interview a couple of weeks ago for an article that came out in the paper preparatory to this, we got off on a tangent about, almost sort of an existential tangent, about the process of writing and being a writer. And I was fascinated by something you said about finding your voice, an author finding one's voice. And I wonder, you've sort of shifted gears a little bit in that the last two adult novels you've written have been what might be called mysteries. Their crimes are solved in these. And I don't think you had any problem shifting gears, because after 35 novels and finding your voice, I don't know if you run into a period where you get anxiety or doubt, where you can't write yourself into a corner without having the confidence to know you'll get out of it. Is that accurate? And is it something that wasn't always there?
Oh, that's such a good writer question. So when I was a young writer, I had no idea what finding one's voice meant. The way I heard that first was that I used to submit stories to the New Yorker, probably like all young writers, and I would send them out and I would enclose a self-addressed stamped envelope, which is how we used to do it. And almost the minute that I sent them out, they would come back with a rejection slip on them. But during that time, I became friends with the drama critic of the New Yorker, Brendan Gill. He noticed that my stories were always about Connecticut, and he was a Connecticut Yankee native himself. And so he invited me down to have lunch at the Algonquin. And I was, gosh, how old was I? I was a teenager. I was like,
Wow.
I'd recently dropped out of college, so I was probably about 19 and so nervous. And he said, you know, he called me dear child. He had this voice. He was from Connecticut, but he had this voice that was somewhat continental in a way. And he was Irish. Dear child, your writing is so lovely. There are two things I'd like to encourage you to do. One, move to New York, leave Connecticut immediately. You must live in New York City to be a writer. And also find your voice. And I was like, those two things are both impossible. And I did actually move to New York City. But finding my voice was kind of like a scavenger hunt, like, what is your voice? And so I realized after lots of time and trying to do it, and really, it really means like write from your core, like write really who you are. And don't go searching for something you think you should be, or, I mean, it's okay to have influences, of course, or, you know, to try new things, but it's sort of like right from somewhere that's, I don't really like the word authentic. It seems very overused these days, but that is authentic to you. And that's it. I feel like it's very hard to define. Like, I feel as if I'm, in a way, you know, sending you after the ruby slippers or something to the writers in the audience. But I think that's it. Like, you need to find your own ruby slippers over and over again. And so, yeah, like right now I'm writing dark mysteries and thrillers because that's where I am right now in my heart and soul, for whatever reason. Is there a psychoanalyst in the house?
And you know what, as someone, that's sort of what I prefer to read. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, we were lucky in this part of Connecticut. There are several authors like yourself that live here, that are regular New York Times bestseller authors and win awards and stuff like that. So it's my privilege to cover all of you guys, and I read whatever you write. But if I'm just sitting around at my age, I sort of like to read a mystery or a thriller. And so I was so impressed when you went in this direction at how effortlessly you seem to pick up the rhythms of it and the tension. And maybe that falls into what you're saying about finding your own voice, because I do think it's a little bit different than the type of book you were writing before. And it just seems like you put on that guise, and it was easy. Is that true?
I've always loved to read mystery, suspense, thrillers from when I was young, you know, very, very little. And, you know, I had a really literary mother. She was an English teacher and a very English majory mother. But, you know, so I mean, I don't want it to sound like it was precious or anything, but I mean, our bookshelves were full of really wonderful classics, and that's what she would read us. But at the same time, it was also filled with Dorothy Sayers, you know, and Erskine Child, you know, writers who, you know, Agatha Christie. And so I think I grew up like loving mysteries. And I always feel like whatever I've written about family, especially, I write a lot about family and relationships, but it's always like the mystery at the heart of the family. And I think that comes from, you know, when I was young, and, you know, I definitely had a wonderful family, but it, you know, like all families, there were some problems, and there were a lot of secrets in my family. And I think that I was always trying to solve, like, if I could figure out what's wrong, I could make everything better. And I remember, like, as a very young kid, being like a detective and like looking in my, you know, this one bottom drawer in the storage room that had like, it had my father's war records, his, you know, papers from, he had been in World War II and he was shot down. And it had all those records, and it had the love letters between him and my mother that he wrote her and that she actually, weirdly enough, they were only his to her. I don't know what that's about, but there we go. See, I know it's,
Yeah, there you go.
and other things too. And uh, and so I was always trying to solve the mystery of the family. And, it was, it, I don't know, it was sort of, it was sad in a way. Like there was a lot of, I just want this to be okay. And I think I got into the habit of investigating when I was really young and thinking that if you're in a family, there's a secret decoder ring. And if you can find that, it's all going to be, you can make it right, and something along those lines. And, so I think that, and then I have a wonderful agent, Andrea Cirillo, who has been my agent since the very beginning, since before I was published. And that's very rare in our business, to be together for that long. I've been with her since about 1980, maybe 1979. And Andrea supports me whatever I write, but she represents a lot of wonderful thriller writers, and so I'd always get the bound galleys of their work. And I feel very lucky about that. And I think that she encouraged me to follow my follow my dark dream and write a thriller, and then I was lucky enough to end up at Thomas and Mercer with Liz Pearson's.
Yeah, that's what they do, and they're really good at it. So, well, speaking of then the dark side, the new book is called The Shadow Box, and because it doesn't come out for a few more days, I think it's okay to say that there's an artist in it named Claire Chase, who gets right up top assaulted and left for dead. And her husband, Griffin Chase, who is a Connecticut state attorney and is running for governor and is a very, very powerful man with a lot of powerful friends. Maybe there are things he's a little worried about, and maybe we can suspect him. How much further should I go to tease these folks without giving away too much?
Rick, I completely trust you. You tell them whatever you think.
Well,
No.
Go ahead.
No, please do.
Well, I just nearly knocked the well, what happens is she's supposed to die in this attack that starts the novel off, and she doesn't. But since she's been left for dead, she escapes and has to figure out some things on her own. And so she stays hidden while she's working on this. At the same time, some of their neighbors experience a boat explosion that's been that someone has set. And we start to wonder in the neighborhood that they live in, which would be somewhere in coastal Connecticut, some old Lyme, old Saybrook / Mystic sort of enclave, that something's amiss. And if it gets in the way of the machinations of Connecticut government, there could be real trouble afoot. One thing I wondered about in the last 4 years, there's been a lot of abuse of power by people in positions that would do anything to keep their power. Were those sort of developments on your mind at all as you wrote, or were you just spin it off like Luanne does?
Well, of course they were on my mind, very much on my mind. I am sure that is even behind partly why I wrote something so dark, that I felt very beaten down by things in government and just in general, a sort of darkness and meanness, and power kind of scares me, I think that. And because another thing in the novel has to do with emotional abuse, which is very much about power and control. So under a person's own roof, under a person's own, in a person's own home, that's a again, it's like I don't like the word toxic either because it's so overused. Authentic and toxic don't use those words. But it's toxic, to be with somebody who is constantly trying to control you, and who and uses a person's power to do that. And in the shadow box, Griffin Chase is, he's very powerful publicly. He is the state's attorney for the Eastern District of Connecticut, and he's also about to run for governor. And so he's claiming this sort of large public power, but he also is exerting that in his own home with a person who, like, I want to say is like me, like somebody who is, loving and gentle and creative, and who tends to see the best in people. And so when a thing like that happens, either I think macro or micro, you want to believe the best, you want to see the best. And then sometimes you're damaged before you even know what's happening. And I think, to me, that's, like, in a way, the quintessence of emotional abuse, which I feel in some ways we've all experienced in the last 4 years.
You and I have spoken about this before, and in fact, a year ago, when we were all in the Bank Square books celebrating the last day, you've always told me that when you start a book, you don't know how it's going to end, and you let your characters sort of dictate as they develop, which is a fun and organic concept. And even though a few of you guys listening may have heard this before, I think it is fascinating. Just because you've switched to thrillers or dark crime novels, that hasn't changed for you. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, because now you have to solve the crime. And it's interesting that you don't know who did it until the end. Have you ever written yourself into any corners in that concept, or?
I don't think I have, but not. I think it's because writing is such a flow. It doesn't always flow as you're writing. I mean, it sounds strange to put, it's hard to explain, but at least for me, when I'm writing a novel, I do the day's work, whatever that might be, however many pages it is, and then I turn it off, and I eventually go to bed and I go to sleep. And somewhere in the night, like, dreams occur, and I wake up in the morning, and somehow I know where to go next. So I get to my desk, and it kind of comes out my fingertips, and it's a mysterious process. And if I planned it, that wouldn't happen. If I plotted or had notes or planned it, that just wouldn't happen. But I feel as if the characters are real enough, if I've created characters who are true and real, that they will tell the story for me, that they will, it's almost inevitable. And probably, I mean, deep down in my subconscious, there probably is something that knows, someone who knows who did it, or who, what's going to happen. But I don't have it consciously, because I think if I did that, I would, I mean, all writers have different, here's another word I don't like, processes, but everyone has a different way of doing it. And if that's your way and it works for you, that's great. But for me, that would feel like painting by numbers. Then I'd be filling in some blanks. It would be like, this happens, this happens, this happens, and then we get to here. But for me, it's better not to know that, to just have this one character who then gets to meet other characters. And along the way, it's like a little world. And so then they tell the story.
I love that you can trust. I wonder if you speaking of subconscious, I wonder if your brain has conditioned you to do that, but maybe so,
Yeah.
Who knows? But so another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because when you and I talk, we get off on all kinds of tangents, and some really cool stuff comes out. And you're talking about the process. You get up and you do your day's work. And what I find really interesting, and I don't know that I could do this, but you like to write in hotels. And I think that's fascinating. And is it true that you wrote the shadow box, in addition to your work at home, of course, in two hotels diametrically opposite across our great land?
Yeah, to some extent I did. I spent a lot of time in a couple of different hotels, and I do love to write in hotels. I always have. And that sounds like I like to hole up in the room privately and write. I actually love writing in hotel lobbies. Isn't that weird? I sometimes like
I,
totally block
I
off
have to interrupt you,
the
Luann. I have to interrupt you because you are much more disciplined and have much stronger willpower. Because if I was in a hotel, I'd be like, I'm in a different town because I'm staying in a hotel. I'm going out. I'm going to go to the bars and the museums and the restaurants. So you don't have to deal with that. You deal with that temptation and you just stay in your room or the lobby.
Well, first of all, Rick, I mean, nobody else knows. Maybe some people on here know, but you are a rock musician and also a rock critic. So of course you'd be going to the clubs and the bars. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know, and a writer too, and you get your material from more interesting places than I do. Overtly interesting. I love your novels, by the way.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think yeah, I love your novels. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something about, I'm a hermit. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a hermit. It's hard to get me to go out, um, to say yes to going out, but I do like to go out. I like to observe. I like to sit in hotel lobbies and write and somehow hear the buzz of the conversation and the music, but be into the book, and I also like being in hotel rooms because you can order room service.
Yeah, you referenced me having been a musician. I'm just going to tell you, they didn't have a lot of room service in the hotels we stayed in. But you mentioned that you're a bit of a hermit, and it is the writer's life is solitude, and I think that's pretty obvious to everyone. In When we all realized last summer that this pandemic was probably going to be here for a while, I wrote a story in which I talked to you and several other writers that live in the area if there was a difference in the solitude of being in a pandemic and trying to write as opposed to when you're just normally writing in your own solitude. There wasn't a pandemic. And I was surprised. I expected everyone to say, this is what I do. So it didn't really make much difference. But it did. There was a different rhythm and anxiety level that all of you guys, in one way or another, alluded to. Talk a little bit about that. Does it change the flow of creativity, or did you notice it while you were working? And I know by that point that the shadow box was already done and you were working on the next book, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's strange. I think being alone by choice. I mean, there's so many things about how there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, and it's certainly a therapy thing, and it's it's something you read about in magazines. Like being alone is one thing. Being lonely is very different. The pandemic hasn't given us much choice about it. Like I can choose to be alone as a writer. I most often do, but I like having the choice if I want to go see my sister or go see my niece or go to New York and have lunch with Andrea, or go see you and Eileen. I mean, how long has it been since we've gone out and had vegetarian food? Um, that's a shout out to Eileen. But or even tonight, we're here on Zoom instead of at Bank Square Books, which luckily this is wonderful. But it beats you down. Like it gets your heart somehow, and then to think about other people who are suffering and other people who have died, and how if I see someone I love and I hug them, what if I give them COVID And, I've thought about that, and the other day, I mean, I had dinner the other night because I do go out. I know not everyone does, but I do go out to dinner. Even though I'm a hermit, I do like to go to restaurants, and I do go. And I think part of it's because I live alone, and and so I went to this restaurant. There was a waitress there who I hadn't seen in a long time, and I'm a regular there. And she was so happy to see me. We had our masks on, but she like literally threw herself. She threw herself into a hug with me, and I was so happy. It's like I can't think of the last time someone did that. And then
Mhm.
as soon as she backed away, I'm like, oh my God, we just hugged. And it's really painful to have that be
Yeah.
how it is, as opposed to a natural thing. 'Cause I am a hugger. As you know, I,
Yeah. Me too.
yeah, I know you are. So it's really hard. That part's really hard. And like one of my kitties was sick, and just having to take her to the vet and park out in the parking lot and have curbside, and they're wonderful at the vet.
Yeah.
Uh, but you know what I mean. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit to the shadow box. And I apologize to folks who are perhaps wanting to know a little more about the book. But again, I'm a little nervous about giving too much away. But the the shadow box in the title has multiple layers of meaning in the book. And of course, the heroine in the book, Claire, is an artist, and she's getting ready at the time she is assaulted to have a new exhibition. And she is a shadow box artist, and she works a lot in um, found material that she runs across on the beach or in nature. And you write so beautifully and evocatively of nature and the shore. And I know that you and your family grew up in those uh, in that setting. Um, do you ever make shadow boxes? Do you collect shells and stuff like that? And I don't know how much I want to say about the shadow box in the title
Mhm.
so talk a bit about that.
Well, titles are so often they have multi levels and multi layers, and hopefully this one does too. But just in its most basic, what a shadow box is a work of art that is a construction. It's a box. It can be one image, or there can be several shells, I guess you would say. And just to go back to where I first saw one, I was my grandmother, who we called Mim, who lived with us, uh, she had great friends. She was a real social butterfly, and she had great friends. And she had a friend in New Britain, where I grew up in the winter times. And this friend she lived in a two-family house. And I remember going with Mim to the house, and I think it was Christmas or something. And we I, on her wall, I was probably 6 years old, and on her wall was a shadow box. And it was a picture that was about, I don't know, a foot square, and it was deep. It was maybe 3 or 4 inches deep, and in it was a diorama, like some kind of story that was being told. And it was like there were buildings and children and dogs, and I think there was an airplane. And it was just absolutely fascinating to me. And I don't know who made it. I don't know anything about it, but it just stayed with me. And then, years later, Joseph Cornell is a wonderful example of somebody whose work is, a shadow, or he does things that are like shadow boxes or are shadow boxes. Um, so, and then to combine that with when I take walks, which I do all the time, on the beach or in the woods, I always pick things up and come home with pockets full of treasures. And my house is full of them, And the weird thing is, no matter how long ago I took those walks, I remember the walk when I look at the pieces. The shells. I have a spider crab shell carapace that my grandmother picked up, that I still have, that she picked up on a walk with me. But so I'll show. It's okay if I do show and tell?
Yeah, please do.
So here's the beautiful book jacket that I love, that the wonderful, wonderful art director did, Shasti O'Leary Sudan at Thomas and Mercer. But then behind it, so you kind of take this is the hardcover, you take the jacket off, and behind it is the book cover, which depicts a shadow box. And, and the funny thing is that Shasti has done my book covers, several of my book covers. She did Last Day, which I also adored. And she's never been to my house, but from reading the book, she somehow figured out what this would be like. And so in it, she put all these beautiful objects, like there's seaweed, there's a blue crab claw, there's sea glass, there's all kinds of shells, there's owl pellets, and, and then, acorns. And so, but I saved this for today, just to show all of our friends here tonight. On my shelves, I just took a selection here. Here, I have a channeled whelk shell that's cracked, that's old. It's full of barnacles. Here is a channeled whelk egg case, which is like, really cool. And anybody who finds these, probably if you found them, it looks like a spine, but it's not. This is actually an egg case from this particular creature. And if you were to open these little sort of compartments up, each one is full of little tiny baby shells that look exactly like this one. But they're so tiny, they're like almost microscopic. I'd open them up for you, but then it'd be a total nerd fest, which I'm sure some of us are. And then here is the spider crab carapace that my grandmother found. So this would have been in like the 70s, and I still have it. And then just a few pieces of sea glass and a pebble. Oh, nice pebble. And then here's a prized one. This is like some kind of bottle. This is like a Coke bottle top. How cool is that?
It's cool.
Isn't that cool? And then this is my favorite color. If anybody ever finds this color, it's like old Coke bottles. I mean, this is like I should have said a soda bottle top. Maybe not Coke bottle, because Coke bottles were more this color. But yeah, so anyway, that's the shadow. Oh, and then this, I have to show this. This is a box. There was a shop in Essex, Connecticut called Faraway Things. It was there quite a while ago. And the woman who ran it she would sell these little boxes that were glass with brass rims. And my sister Rosemary bought this box when she was a teenager, and she filled it with shells that she collected. It's taped shut now, but can you see this one that's painted? And
yeah.
She used to paint sea glass with like acrylic paints with little tiny brushes. So this is my life, and that's the shadow box.
It's a good life. And the book cover is almost eerily perfect.
It really is. It really is.
Well, Luanne, if I'm looking correctly, there are a lot of readers and viewers that would like to ask you questions, and they probably wish I would shut up. So, Anastasia, is that fair? Is it about time?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to our audience questions. We have quite a few, and we have some that were pre-submitted. So we're going to sort of combine as we're able to, and we'll get to as many as we can. And I just want to say thank you, Rick and Luanne, for that incredible spoiler-free conversation. That was great. So let's dive right in. And thank you to everyone who has submitted questions and voted on them. That makes it really great and easy for us to sort of filter them in. The most popular question so far is something you guys started to touch on, and I think everyone would love to hear a little bit more, because Luanne, you so beautifully write the scenery in your books. But Erin M asks, and others have asked as well, she's curious about why you use some real Connecticut towns and then some made up ones.
That's a really good question. I think because the made up ones are the ones that are the most personal to me. That it's sort of, it has to come more from my imagination to actually write the town, to make it fictional. And I'm sure you're referring to Blackhall and Hubbard's Point. But I do sometimes, for example, New London, I will call it New London usually, as opposed to Rick, who in his novel calls it Port City, which I quite and by the way, in Hubbard's Point and Black Hall in my book, David Handler, who's a wonderful old Lyme writer, calls it Dorset, and Dominic Dunn, who is also an old Lyme writer, used to call it Prudhomme. So we have a sort of good tradition of calling old Lyme anything but old Lyme.
I love that. And are there any particular stories from your youth on the Connecticut shoreline that you've like really leaned into and woven into at least your most recent books?
Yes, I mean, probably almost everything. In terms of, I mean, my most, here we have a friend. Here. This is Emily. Um, I don't really use stories from my own life that are real. I might use feelings. In fact, that's exactly what I do. I use emotions to write stories that feel real to the reader, I hope, but that are not, but that come from something I've been through. But if you think about real things that have happened, yes, in the shadow box, there are some things that a reader might recognize in current events and say, oh yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So these two questions are going to go back to back, and I'm really glad we've had a little kitty friend visitor. So first, Lori would like to know if your cats had careers, what would they be? And then the follow-up to that is Donna would like to know if you weren't a writer, what would you be? So a good two-parter there.
Well, the second answer is a cat. Be a cat. And as for the first, here's Emelina. Shall we ask her? What would you be, Emelina? She says a writer.
Yeah.
Look at that, twin lives entwined, right?
We're going to trade places.
So Adise, and Adise, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Thank you for your question.
Hi.
She would like to know about the inspiration for this story, and I know I would too. Last Day was based on a very famous crime that was committed in this area. Is there any real tie in the shadow box?
So not exactly. The shadow box began in my own, in my own imagination with the character of Claire. But what is very interesting and kind of just uncanny and maybe a little, I don't know, is that after I had finished a draft in our state, a terrible thing happened. Jennifer Farbodoulos disappeared, and she's missing to this day. She's been declared dead, and her husband, who is now deceased, was charged with her murder. But there was such an echo in that case with the shadow box. So it's something I think people might notice. And it's a case that I've been very moved by and affected by. I've kept Jennifer very much in my mind since I wrote the book. I think I spoke about her last time when we spoke about Last Day at Bank Square Books last time. I spoke about her case and her being missing and what it meant to me to know about her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was very poignant. So we've got a couple questions here just about how you research for a book. Could you talk a little bit more about what sort of research you might do, particularly when writing a thriller like Shadowbox or Last Day?
I love doing research. I feel like, one of the great things about being a writer and being curious about life is to, be able to sort of live many lives and have many careers. And, and I think back to some of my earlier works I've written about fishing families and lobster fishermen and archaeologists and lawyers. I'm very interested in the law. I think part of me, an alter ego of mine, would be to be a lawyer. Marine biology, artist. I mean, certainly artist. I wish I could be an artist more than anything. But in the shadow box, there were definitely, I had to do a lot of research about law and police procedure, which I'm also interested in. And, and then just a lot to do with nature and a lot to do with the wilderness, because Claire hides out in the wilderness quite a bit, and her dad was a professor. So that's another thing, academics. And I love doing research. And in the old days, I used to love to go to the library, and I would all the time. I would just, I know so many of the libraries around my area here, and where other places where I lived. When I lived in Paris, I used to go to the American Library. It was across the Seine from where I lived, and it was like a little ritual of mine. I'd wake up and walk across, the bridge, the Pont de l'Alma, and I'd get to the library, and right when it opened, and go in, and it had a carol there, and it was fantastic, and I miss that, because it's so easy now to just go online and just do, just hit Google, and that's great too. It's instant, but it and I still, this is the thing, I still order the books, no matter what. My bookcase is so full of books from everything I've written, because I want to have the volumes in my house. But so I'll look them up online, and then I'll order the book anyway. I just like it.
There's something so magical about being in a beautiful library or bookstore, the smell of it, the feel of it. I think.
And actually, Ani, from the Bank Square Books, I said I ordered them online. Lately, I've had to, but when I order them mostly from Bank Square Books, and recently I've been doing some research on the Pequot tribe, and on the Pequot War here in the Mystic area, and I was able to get the most unusual and out of print books through Bank Square Books. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that nice compliment. We appreciate that. So another two-parter here. So another question that we got was, you've written a lot of books about love and family and sort of those slightly softer but harsh in their own way topics, but now you've moved to murdering people, which Rick actually very poignantly pointed out in his advance article from the event. So what has it been like to sort of make that shift? And then Nicole M, who it looks like is also from Old Lyme, wants to know what's your experience been like with Thomas and Mercer?
Well, that's a very easy answer. It's been wonderful. I am very, very lucky to be published by Thomas and Mercer. I have a wonderful editor, Liz Pearsons. She is so enthusiastic and so brilliant. Just the most supportive person ever. I was very lucky to meet her with Andrew. We met at lunch right at the very beginning of our relationship in New York. And and then since then, before the pandemic, I got to go to a few Thomas and Mercer events, and that's really cool, because there's something about the community of writers who are published by them, who've been in, and some of them have given me quotes. Lee Goldberg, Robert Dugoni, very, very supportive people, and so that's been great. And the first part of that question, what was the first part?
Just what's the experience been like shifting to writing dark thrillers?
Right. Believe it or not, it doesn't feel different at all. I don't know why. I guess because to me, it's just, it might be, it's on the spectrum. It's a little more here than it is here in the family love realm, but it still is, it's about relationships and family. So it doesn't feel different to me. It really doesn't. I don't know. People keep asking me that, so I think that it might be the wrong answer, but it's how I really feel. So
yeah, absolutely. So just more on sort of the topic of writing, Donna B asks, at the beginning you talked about writing what's authentic to you and sort of the process of being a writer, and she asks, so when you say write what's authentic, do you mean write what you know?
Yes, I do. But that's a tricky one too, because write what you know, I don't mean write what you literally know, but write what you know somehow in here in the core, so that it's coming from a place where you don't have to go, it's like you don't have to go out and sort of search. There doesn't have to be like a search for, the worst thing for me is when Like, don't look for what's popular. Don't look for what's commercial. Don't look for what's trendy. Like, write what is interesting to you, what really interests you, and what you love. And it doesn't mean that write what you know. I mean, you might have to learn about it. You might decide you want to write about, underwater exploration, and you know nothing about it, but you're drawn to write about that. Or you might want to write about, I don't know, being a, I don't know, courtesan in France, and, several centuries ago. And you'd have to learn about it, but it's something you really want to write. But you're not doing it because you're somehow scanning the bookshelves or the bestseller list or whatever seems to be working. Because that, I just feel like, write about what is interesting to you, really interesting to you, and moves you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such great advice. And Donna had a follow-up question that I think Rick will get a kick out of. Donna wants to know if you and Rick would ever consider a collaboration.
Ooh, I think that would be really interesting.
I would be honored and privileged, of course. Luanne has read a lot of my manuscripts, and that she hasn't run screaming into the wild over some of the subject matter. Yeah, you never know. Luanne is, I should have asked earlier, she's already got 2 books in the works and probably ideas for more. So, but anyway, it's an interesting thought, definitely.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Rick's writing. First of all, again, back to the day. If anybody here is local, please subscribe to the day anyway. But even if you're not local, subscribe, because we have a lot of cool news in this area. There's a lot of really good local news. There's a lot of good, they do a great job with national news, and the arts, it's, without compare. So I love Rick's journalism, but over many years now, I've gotten to read Rick's published novels and his music about, his books about music that are fantastic. And people who love music are devotees. They're like cult, rabidly fans of his. But the most recent is a manuscript I read not long ago, and honest to God, I laughed so hard. It's like Carl Hyacin never really made me laugh that hard. And there is a comparison. If I were going to do a comp, it would be Carl Hyacin. It is so funny. Rick's hilarious.
Thank you. That's
and by the way, subscribe just so you can get past, so you can read the article, even the lovely the lovely interview he did with me, which I'm so proud of. Thank you, Rick. So yes,
thank you. Very nice of you to say. But
Rick, you're gonna have to send me that manuscript. I need a good laugh right now.
Do that.
Okay, so next up I have just a comment from Donna E, and she just wanted to say thank you. Her father passed away last year, and she found an old copy of Summer Light, and she reread it this past year, and it really took her out of her head, and she's very grateful to you. So I just wanted to shout that out, since she took the time to put that in the questions.
Thank you, Donna E. I'm very sorry to hear, and I'm sending you all my sympathy. And I'm really glad that somehow the book could comfort you.
All right. So switching gears, we're got a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. So Jessica E asks if you have a favorite hotel lobby to write in. I feel like you probably can't play favorites, but.
Oh, I can. I certainly can. I have several favorites. I have 3 that come to mind right off the top of my head. One is 250 Main in Rockland, Maine, which is this wonderful boutique hotel that is on the harbor in a very, very amazing town in Maine, which is, it's one of the most, I think, fascinating art cities, towns in America. They have 2 great museums and a lot of galleries, but it's also like a working fishing port. And this building was built by, Lyman, oh gosh, somebody is going to hear me saying this and they'll send in the name. Is it Lyman Morris? Some absolutely classic, wonderful boat builders in Maine did this interior of this hotel. And it has, oh, Morse, thank you, Faith. Faith's, okay, and Faith is Orlando's mom. Faith is from Cambridge, England, and she just sent me the answer. So Lyman Morse, and it's really magical place, and it looks right out on the harbor of Rockland. And I've been there for 2 winters with all 4 cats, where there was a blizzard each time I was there, and it was the best. Um, so that's one. The other is the Ocean House in Watch Hill, Rhode Island, which is really close to where I live, but I go there and I feel as if I'm in another country. It's so wonderful. It's an old hotel. Well, actually, it was an old hotel when I was growing up. It was a salty old classic, incredible East Coast beach hotel that was very, very, but it's been completely redone. It's very luxurious. And I like to stay on one of the top floors where I can look out at the ocean, and I can look out at Watch Hill Passage. I can see all the way out to Block Island, and it's just that's really wonderful. And the lobby's great, and my sister and her husband and daughter and my nieces go there, and it's kind of our special place to go. But then I'd like to say, for last, the Malibu Beach Inn, which is in Malibu, California, and it's just wonderful. It's on the beach. It's overlooks the Pacific, and I've written several novels there. And the general manager is Gregory Day, and I've known him for a really long time. And he's doing this promotion for the month of February, where he is giving a copy of the Shadow Box to every guest who stays there. And it's such a generous thing to do. And his reasoning is that because of COVID, people who are checking in can't do the normal things maybe that they might do in Malibu, that just some of the places aren't open right now. And so it's a cool time to stay in, read a book, listen to the waves, have a great meal. And so those are the 3: 250 Main, Ocean House, and Malibu Beach Inn.
What an incredible testament to those places, and how cool that if you stay at the Malibu Beach Inn, you get a copy of the Shadow Box. I love that.
Yeah.
So going back to the Shadow Box, we've got 2 questions that I don't think will give any spoilers to the book. But Jackie asks, how did Claire being an artist and working in mixed media in the book, how did that come to be? We talked a little bit about that, maybe if you wanted to expand. And then Lori asked, she mentions the mountain lion that is sort of prominent in the book. And I don't know if that'll give anything away. So I'll let you decide, Luanne, how you want to answer that.
The first for Jackie, I think that mixed media is something of interest to me, and maybe not being a really talented fine artist myself, somebody who doesn't paint or draw, that the one thing I have been able to do is collage. And so that's been always something that I've really been drawn to. And so I think that probably informed Claire's talent to some extent. And also I'm a big fan of one of my favorite artists is Maureen McCabe, who was my college professor at Connecticut College. She was, a fine arts professor and painter, and she is a fantastic artist. I wish I could show you one of her pieces. There's one actually, well, anyway, they're amazing. But they are constructions, and they are mixed media, and very mystical, very mysterious. And she shows at the Cooley Gallery in Old Lyme if anybody wants to go to their website and look her up. So she's a big inspiration. And then the mountain lion, it's just, okay, so the mountain lion, and when I lived in Malibu, there were a lot of mountain lions that were sighted in the Santa Monica Mountains. And I found it just really mystical and alluring. To have such a wild beast like right in my backyard, basically. I never saw one, but as a big environmentalist and conservationist, I was worried that the population was being decimated by the use of poison, by the use of pesticide. So I got kind of interested in that, and how Malibu has actually banned any kind of pesticide because it gets into the food chain. Right. So if you put out, even here in Connecticut, if you put out poison in your house to kill a mouse, and that mouse goes outside and a hawk or an owl eats the mouse, that poison gets into that creature and that creature dies. So on a larger scale, and if a mountain lion eats an animal that has eaten your home rat poison or something, that, the mountain lion will die. So I became very sort of interested in that population. And I began like wondering about about the East Coast, where there have been in the past, there have been cougars, mountain lions. There's sort of a myth like that they're still in Connecticut. And one of my friends, who is Andy Griswold of Connecticut Audubon, said that that they still get sightings. That I forget when he told me the last documented sighting was, but I began thinking about Old Lyme, or I mean Blackwall, in my book, and thinking about mountain lions or almost extinct animals, and how there is like a parallel to me with Claire in that she's almost extinct. She's been attacked and left for dead. So
Absolutely. What an awesome metaphor. Okay, so Lori asks, what upcoming books can we look forward to? And Lori, the Shadow Box, it's upcoming still. We have until February 1st. We're counting down to next Monday. We're very excited. But Luanne, do you have anything else in the works that you can give us a little sneak peek on the horizon about?
I do, and it's funny, I just noticed that was Lori. Is that Lori from New Mexico?
I don't think it's Lori. It's Lori W, not Lori H.
Oh, okay. Because Lori from New Mexico, she knows my love of art. I nearly bought a house from her that was owned by Agnes Martin, another really favorite artist of mine.
Lori says it's Lori from Old Lyme.
Lori, oh, okay. Hi, Lori from Old Lyme. You're wonderful too. Thank you. I am working on another novel that is a thriller that will bring back some characters from both Last Day and The Shadow Box. They will bring back the Reed brothers and Kate and a couple of others. So hopefully stay tuned for that. And then I'm also writing a young adult novel that will come out at some point.
That's so exciting. I absolutely have fallen in love with these characters. And as I rush through my advanced copy of The Shadow Box in advance of our event, I'm hopeful that someday we'll get to see these books come to the silver screen, because I think the heart racing aspect of the thriller in this beautiful area would just be so incredible.
It would be fun if they filmed it here.
It would be amazing. So we have two more questions, and before we get to them, because they're really great questions to end on, I just want to take a second to encourage all of our readers to go ahead and pre-order a copy of The Shadow Box, pick up a copy of Last Day. As you've seen in the chat, Luanne has graciously signed books for us, and we'll be doing another round of personalizations before Shadow Box goes on sale. So if you'd like your book personalized, you can make a note in the order comments, and we'll say probably Thursday end of day will be the deadline for those personalized copies for the time being, if you want it on pub day. And I want to thank Luanne and Rick. And with that, I'd like to get to Jessica and Donna's questions, because they're really great to end on.
Before we end on those wonderful questions, can I go back to one question that you asked a minute ago?
Absolutely. You can do whatever you want.
Well, it was, I don't know why I didn't say this before, but I think because it's sort of two mindsets. But you asked about, many people have asked, why do I write thrillers? Why have I started writing mysteries? It's actually young adult as much as anything else. I've written 2 young adult novels, and the one that I mentioned just now will be my third. Actually 3, I'm sorry, I've written 3 young adult novels, and those 3 have all been to some extent thrillers. And they were actually my entree into the world of suspense. And that were literally suspense, as opposed to just like a novel that has a suspenseful element to it. And the last one was Pretend She's Here. And and it's quite, it's young adult, it's for teens, but it really has a very large suspense element. And I just want to mention my editor, Amy Friedman, who is at Scholastic. And
and Amy's chatting in right now.
Oh my God. Oh, Amy, I love you so much. Yeah, she's the best. And so it's just wonderful how kids love the dark side. So that's been really, really fun. Oh, and I'm now like I gotta put on my glasses for a minute because there's
We've got a
Debbie
pretend
too.
she's here fan club going on in the chat
Wow,
right now.
how
Wonderful.
fantastic. I love that. And there's Debbie. Oh my gosh, Debbie is the best young adult, right? Don't we love Debbie?
We love Debbie. Debbie Michiko Florence is one of our other beloved local authors, and she's been writing some really incredible middle grade novels, one of which came out last year, Keep It Together, Kiko Carter, and she has another one coming out this year as well. So it's great to be.
I'm really hoping Debbie will let me read a Bound Galley, an advanced copy of her new one. If anybody has a copy of Debbie's book, let's hold that up because she's amazing. I love her so much. But if you don't, just look her up. Debbie Michiko Florence is amazing. So, oh, hi Rachel. Hi. Oh gosh, look at all these wonderful friends. The scroll is like going like crazy now. Wow.
I know. We've got such a great crowd here.
Okay, so I didn't mean to like upstage those two last questions. I'm ready.
Not at all. Not at all. So these two questions are actually ones that we've asked a lot over the last 10 months that we've been doing virtual events. And so I'm going to just ask them in succession and you can sort of answer them as you like, and we'll sort of wrap up following that. But Jessica E asked, what have you been reading and loving during quarantine? And then Donna B would like to know, what is the first thing you're going to do when we're all able to resume some semblance of normalcy again?
Oh gosh, those are great questions. I'm sad to say that 3 of the books that I'm reading right now are in the pile of books that are holding up my computer, or I would love to show you the covers. One is, and you all must order this. You must pre-order it and read it. It's Eternal by Lisa Scottolini. And Lisa is known for her amazing thrillers, her amazing legal thrillers. And this book is not that. It's a historical novel that is just going to rip your heart out. It's still very suspenseful, but it's just wonderful. So that's called Eternal by Lisa Scottolini. Also, my agency sister, Andrea's, a client of hers is Kristen Hanna, who all of you know. She's an incredibly wonderful writer. And her new novel, Four Winds, is coming out any minute now. And that's another one that I recommend highly. Chris Bajalian has The Flight Attendant, which is now an HBO limited series. That's quite amazing. My old pal, Joe Moninger, who I wrote the letters with, has some young adult novels that are based on sharks, which he and I both have a complete obsession with sharks. So I recommend those. And Patrick Carson, who is my social media manager, who I adore, also represents India Hicks. Now, this is sort of a side trip for me, but India Hicks, who does books about it's just these beautiful large picture books about life and about lifestyle and about England and about the Bahamas. And so I've been sort of reading those like as dream, flipping through them and imagining I'm going to go back to England with my sister Maureen. We had a wonderful trip to London just before the pandemic, and I'm going to go to the Bahamas and just be on the beach, and 2 things I probably won't do for a long time. But so yeah, those are the what I can think of right off the bat.
Well, thank you so much to you, Luanne, and to Rick. Thank you for always being such ardent supporters of our bookstore. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us and join this amazing group of people tonight as we chatted. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching, the Read of the Day is a monthly series, and we feature a different author every month and talk about the book. And we try to connect with other Connecticut authors or influences. And with that being said, join us next month to discuss All Girls, which will be a debut novel for Emily Layden. And we hope to see you there for that. And then our alum from Read of the Day are actually our first virtual event for Read of the Day last year was Kenneth Rosen, and he's out with a new book called Troubled. And he is joining us actually this Thursday at 6 p.m. for a virtual event. So if you're around, come join us, join the conversation. We love having you in this virtual space. And it's such an important thing to keep events alive so that when the time comes, we can all gather together again.
That all sounds so great. And thank you so much, Annie and Rick and everybody at Bank Square Books and all of my old friends and new friends and readers. And I'm sending so much love to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so
All
much.
right.
And
Thank
with
you,
that,
guys.
I'm going to end the Zoom, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. This will be a recording, and we'll get that posted in about a week. Have a great night, everyone.